Well, hello there, and welcome to the Living Word Family Church podcast. I am the man behind the board, Zach Bensel, and we are coming to you not only through your ears, but through your eyes as well. Yes, that's right. We're on video. You can check us out on our Facebook page, YouTube, Vimeo, all that good stuff. If audio podcasts, if that's something you like, but you also like to watch, then check it out. Let us know what you think. Please let us know what you think, because we want this to be enjoyable for our church family specifically. Right. I think it's cool if anyone else watches, but we definitely want our church family to enjoy it and be involved. So I think we still have the email podcast at livingwordfamily.org.
Yes, we do.
Feel free to email us if you have any questions. But also, guys, it's not a big church. Just come find me, Matt, or Scott, and let us know if there's something that you like or don't like, or if you're like, what's a podcast? Yeah. Matt will be more than happy to explain that to you.
That's exactly right. With full technical detail. Well, no, maybe not with full technical
Nobody
details.
Wants that.
Nobody wants
time for that.
Nobody got time for that.
And actually, if it's anything bad, just send it to Sherrill.
Send it to Sherrill. Yeah, actually, just if you have any questions about anything ever, please talk to Sherrill.
Exactly. She can answer everything.
That's
Theological questions, office questions, certainly any kind of technical computer programmatic questions. She's got it all.
She is the go-to.
She's
Absolutely.
the go-to.
She'll really appreciate it.
Been a little while.
Yes.
And she likes to feel needed. So
yes.
Don't we all?
Yeah.
I absolutely, don't hesitate to flood her with your technical question.
That would be hilarious. Just throughout the week, she gets a random computer question in her email.
Yeah. But welcome back, guys.
It's good to be back. We were just talking before we
yes.
started recording that it's been 4.5 years since we did this last.
Which is wild.
It is crazy.
It is wild.
I can hardly believe that. That's half the time I have been back at Living Word Family Church.
Wait, what's the total time you've been senior pastor?
9 years.
Really?
9 years total.
Yeah.
Wow.
Now, how long, because I'm always, for some reason, trying to think of this, just to see if I've outlived you as youth pastor. How long were you on staff as youth pastor?
10 years.
I'm way past that.
Wow. How long have you been youth pastor?
I'm in my 15th year.
Wow. Way to go.
I know. It's very exciting. Wait, is that right?
Well, I've been at the
trouble
church
with
for
numbers.
28 years, so...
You've been at the church?
Yeah,
you're 28 years old?
Yeah.
You were born here, right?
Born
I'm pretty
here.
sure the water
I was
broke
literally
here.
born here. I wasn't born here.
Okay.
No, hey, I just wanted to say we had built up some pretty good momentum when we were doing these podcasts. I don't know how many we got out, and we were sort of feeling our way at the beginning, and then we kind of settled into a routine. Had some excellent interviews and
great guests.
And we're going to do that again. We're all that to say we're back, and in many ways we're starting from scratch. This podcast is just sort of to maybe
get her
blow
feet
the
wet
dust off
again.
things.
Yeah.
And so we'll be kind of talking about some random things and exploring some possible future podcasts, I think, and maybe just getting our vocal cords limbered up for the future. But this podcast is and always has been mainly something for our church family to touch base on, maybe catch up on some things that you missed during announcements, whatever. There's not a real rigid structure to this, but obviously, guests are welcome. So if you're not part of our church family, thanks for tuning in anyway. We'd love to meet you someday. Yeah. And so for today, we have no guest in the studio.
Nope.
We have no particular subject we need to discuss, and we're a little bit limited on time. So what do we want to talk about?
Well, and I feel like I kind of dropped the ball because I did introduce myself, but... For those of you who are watching or listening for the first time, that's Pastor Scott Millis, lead pastor here at Living Word Family Church. And there we go. I'll get it. And that is Matt Kreider, our youth director, tech guy extraordinaire. Fade in applause.
Oh, there we go. I like it.
And Zach is not just the man behind the board. He's one of our praise and worship leaders and musicians and tech volunteer extraordinaire, as well as you're something else here.
I don't know.
Bachelor looking for a wife.
Small group. I do a small group.
He's a
small group leader.
Very enjoy that.
He used to be a youth leader. He's been involved with so many areas around the church.
Whole family.
Seriously, I mean, just not to
I believe it was on this podcast that the phrase or the title "Zach of all trades"
I literally was just thinking about that.
Yeah, right. That will be on my tombstone for sure. But no, that just came to mind. That is one thing that I think has kind of kicked into gear since we, last time we recorded was small groups.
It absolutely has been. We have always had care groups.
Yes,
and some of them have been very well attended, and some faithful people who have been involved in that, but it has not been what I would call a robust ministry of this church for a number of years. And part of that's because we switched over and put the emphasis on a midweek service and more large gatherings. COVID kind of put us in a place where we had the opportunity to focus back on small groups when we were making an effort in those early days not to gather as often in the building.
Right.
I know people have different feelings about that, but we were in a place where, to be perfectly frank, it's something. The small groups ministry was something that we had for at least 2 years prior to that really been praying about and wrestling with how can we make that into the ministry that we want it to be, because we are in a time where I believe small groups are absolutely going to be the backbone of the church. So we relaunched them during we stopped having our midweek service on Wednesday nights so that we would give people, so they didn't have to choose between, well, if I go to church Wednesday night, then I'm not going to have time for another night. So we took that Wednesday night thing and made that an opportunity for them to participate in small groups, and they have. The response has been tremendous.
Do you know, I know you and Jake touch base about it quite a bit. Do you know what our participation rate is? Percentage-wise of the church? I thought it was pretty high.
It is high. It's amazing. I think it's between 60 and 70%, which is extraordinary.
Pretty amazing.
Yeah. And Jake is the man who heads up our small groups, and is very talented and very blessed and
very organized.
To do so. Very organized.
Yes.
He would be actually. We'll probably have to pry him onto the podcast, but he would be definitely a good guest to talk about.
He would probably demand to sit off camera. So that's
probably.
He could be like when they interview those people, and it's just the black silhouette and the voice change and all that stuff. But no, small groups, it's actually kind of interesting. So I just got back from a trip, and we actually it was a hiking trip in Utah, and on that trip we actually met some kids, or some guys, shouldn't say kids, some guys from Utah or from Canada. They were down there hiking, and they were talking, and obviously a lot, tougher restrictions there, I feel like, than we did here during COVID. But he said how he was part of a church, and then COVID happened and there was no meeting, and so they just started kind of meeting as a small group in someone's home, and they were able to do that and not get in trouble, because there was some phrasing that he used, but like they didn't say they were a church. They said they were like a wellness group or something like that. So it was really cool that they were, they found, and they weren't a large church. I think he literally said it was maybe 15 or 20 people, but it was, that they were able to still meet as a small group. That's what he called it.
And that's not necessarily a can of worms we want to open up, or the trail we want to go down to today, but I feel like just the fact that I'm not calling it a church, people are like, whatever, as far as leadership and stuff like that. Because I feel like, and there was a huge church out in, John MacArthur's church.
Yeah,
he had quite a battle on his hands trying to stay open and stay in place. And when a lot of these other large companies and businesses were, it's like you could clearly see there's a force working against the church, not just during COVID, but even ever since. I mean, it's been brewing for a while, and I think we've seen some of it start to really rear its ugly head.
Sure.
Even in the United States, where we have largely enjoyed quite comfortable church going, what I mean, pretty much forever. I mean, that's just been
religious liberty.
Liberty, which. So interesting, and we've talked a little bit about this with my students, not super in depth, obviously. There's only so much you can kind of process at a certain age, but I feel like we're really going to have to start toughening up as a church family, not just here locally, but all over. Because we're if you think about it, we haven't had to exercise our faith and freedom and muscles. And we're fighting against persecution.
Correct.
The church thrives under persecution, whether we like it or not. That's just kind of how, because God shows up for those people who are pursuing him with a passion. And when you don't have to do that on a regular basis, pursue him with a passion, you just kind of, it's part of your day to day, or even maybe just even your week to week. Hey, we go to church as a family, we go home, we live our lives. There's not, I don't think that's a breeding ground for serious faith and passion.
Well, it's, James says, count it all joy when you face, struggles, trials, all that stuff. And you're right. You're absolutely right.
There's a tension there, because I never want to appear ungrateful.
Right.
We live in a country where we should be daily thankful for the freedoms and frankly the ease, that we live in, because they are. I'm 100% convinced they are blessings from God, but it's impossible to please God without faith.
Yeah.
And we want to trust in God. We believe we do trust in God, but I don't know if anybody really knows if they are trusting in God until they have to, until that's your only option.
Yeah.
I've heard many people say that. I didn't really learn what faith was until faith was my only option. And we still live in a country with a lot of options when it comes to our provision, when it comes to our health, and when it comes to our freedoms, I don't want to go too far down the path of, where do we draw that line? Where do we not cave? Because that line would get into the political aspects of it. It can get a little blurry. And what are we fighting for? Are we fighting for America? Are we fighting for the kingdom? And I don't want to conflate those two things, but obviously our country is what it is because of its faith-filled roots. And that's probably a good topic for another day, where it wouldn't be a bad idea to bring in somebody with a little more political expertise, or at least history expertise or something.
I agreed. I think that's good. And you mentioned James. We've been in youth group, which we still meet on Wednesday nights for youth group for church. We just don't have a overall main church service, children's ministry, but we still do youth group on Wednesday nights. And we've been in the book of James. We may not stay in it as long as you did back when I was in youth group, but we are in the book of James. And we didn't hit this passage last night, but it was in the section we were going over. And in James chapter 2, verse 5 says, Listen to me, dear brothers and sisters. Hasn't God chosen the poor in this world to be rich in faith? Because when you are lacking in everything else, God is it. Like you can't say, well, I trust in God, but I've got a backup plan, my bank account, or I've got a backup plan, I've got a rich family member, or I've got, whatever. Hasn't God chosen the poor? There's nothing wrong with having wealth, but there's also that temptation when you are well off, when you do have plenty in your bank account, there is that temptation to rely on that instead of on God.
Sure. Yeah.
So I think as a church, we're going to need to really dig in. And I'm not saying fight the man. I'm not talking about that. I'm just talking about just really digging into our faith, because you never know when this comfort we've enjoyed for so long can just disappear and evaporate. And in so many countries, home church and hiding is the only way they have it.
Yeah.
And yet they are absolutely incredible at memorizing the word, because that's their option.
Yeah.
They have to memorize it. And like this, you know what I mean? Like, it's just, I feel like we're here in the coming decades, we're getting ready to grow up real fast as far as.
I think that you put it a good way, Sky, when you said, are we fighting for the kingdom or are we fighting for America? I think it's, when this adversity comes, not if, but when, like you're saying, dig into our faith, not to dig into our faith to save America or save our idea of America. And not that there's anything wrong with that, but that's not the end goal.
No,
we're digging into our faith to build the kingdom, to be strong to encourage one another, like-minded believers, and to help each other. When that adversity comes, it's not
to keep in mind that the people who are acting as our enemies are the people that Jesus loves and died for, and
it's
our
not
goal
a rebellion.
is to save them, not to kill them, not to defeat them, but to open their eyes and pray for them.
It's so funny. We talked about that last night in youth group too. We talked about the verse that says, don't show favoritism. And James was specifically talking about, hey, when a rich man comes into your church, don't show them favoritism, and then a poor person shove them off to the side to the back. So now, granted, we expanded on that illustration and just basically talked about, you've got friends that are dressed better, or you've got kids in school that don't dress the way you dress or don't hang out with the same kids you hang out with. It's like there's intrinsic value in all of these people.
Right.
And whether they think the same way you do, act the same way you do, hang with the same people you do, have the same money you do, whatever it is, It's like, no, you are to treat these people with kindness, respect, and love no matter what. And that's going to make a difference, and then people are going to notice that.
Right.
So that was kind of the crux of our message last night, which seemed pretty well received.
Yeah.
So
That's good.
Good.
Very good.
Yeah,
Exciting
James
stuff.
is good stuff. That's I've often referred to it as Christianity where the rubber meets the road.
Right.
This is a handbook to practical Christianity.
Practical Faith is what I titled the series. Practical Faith.
Nice.
Yep.
How long did you go through James? When you were in youth group?
Oh my!
Done it so many times over the years, but it was probably 30 messages.
Oh, it was insane. Like it got to be kind of a running joke where we would literally spend an entire
we had
Wednesday night
a
service
farewell
on like
to
one.
James party when it was over. I
Did
think.
you really? That's awesome.
But it was good. It was all good stuff. It just cracked me up how.
And I always stressed, look, we are not just, it's like, well, if you're going to spend that much time on one book, aren't you ignoring a lot of the Bible? But I stressed as often as I could, we are not just studying the book of James, we're using the book of James as an outline to study doctrines woven throughout Scripture.
Well, and, it's not like, when you have a book that's so rich with so much stuff packed into it, how do you not take that much time to go through it? I mean, every verse is like you said, a jumping off point, a message. Now could you do 30? The question is, could you do 30 messages of Leviticus?
You could probably break down every law.
Yeah, probably.
Probably. I'm sure someone out there has done it.
Absolutely. Who wrote The Miracle of the Scarlet Thread? Richard Booker. That's his favorite book of the Bible. He's probably got 30 plus messages on Leviticus. Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's so funny to me. You meet people and everyone's all about the Enneagram and all these personality tests and stuff. But then it's also like when they tell you their favorite book of the Bible, it tells you a little bit of something about them too.
Yeah, it does.
You're just meeting them and you're
That's a
like,
good point.
Because am I incorrect in you saying that James is your favorite?
I don't know if I'd still say it's absolutely my favorite, but it's
one of your top. It's one of your top,
sure.
and that tells a lot about I think who you are. Very thinker and really like to dive deep into it, and that's what James.
And
does.
a lot of what I love about James is it's not just. And you can dig in and pull deep theological truths out of it, of course. Mm-hmm. You can do that in any book of the Bible, no matter what, because God built it that way. The Spirit wakens that stuff up inside of us. But what I love about James is that it's just like, hey, we're living day to day. You're living around people. You are around people. How does our faith affect how we talk to other people, how we live around other people, how we minister to other people, how we ourselves, the language we use, how we speak, how we carry ourselves.
Right.
And that's one of the reasons I called it Practical Faith for this series, is because it's like a lot of these kids in youth group, especially now, like last month or so, we've gotten a huge influx of just new kids who are just, and I can't, back in the day, you can probably speak to this too, Pastor. It's like back in the day, I could mention a story and just assume most of the kids knew what I was talking about. I can't even do that anymore.
Yeah.
I can't just assume when I mention Jonah or if I mention Paul or if I mention any of these people that these kids just have at least a basic knowledge of who these people are, because they don't. I'll say, hey, who can tell me who such and such is? And like one hand will go up.
Yeah. That's
okay. A little backstory. Here we go.
It's scary. Not scary. But it's you're facing a challenge at a level that I didn't have to face it when I started. At least when I started as a youth minister,
because you had like theologians like me in there. I mean, that's like
exactly.
Well, and the thing is, it's not just kids anymore.
Right.
You have full-grown adults.
Right.
Who,
biblically illiterate.
Yes.
We did something.
Which is also, you can consider fertile ground too, as long as they are not like, if they're coming to church, you can at least understand that they're open to the things of God.
Yeah.
Whereas if you're meeting people out on the street, you can't even assume that anymore. It's like some people just have an absolute like animus towards God and will just openly fight you verbally over things.
Yeah.
And we've had to, as believers, kind of, I'm not saying you've got to be an apologist at every corner, but it's like we've got to be able. Hey, we got to be able to defend, like what Peter. Right? Am I thinking Peter be able to give a defense of your faith, where you put your hope? Yeah, I mean, we got to be able to do that as believers.
That's
be able to say, hey, no, God's not the way you're making him sound.
Right.
And I don't know what year this was. It was early on in my tenure as youth pastor. We did something called the Bible Timeline, Solid Rock Bible Timeline Quizorama. Wow. 3 or 4 page quiz. We took the whole service for people just to take this test, and we numbered the copies so that we could post the results without
Oh,
embarrassing
wow.
stuff. And I think one guy who was a student at Judah Christian High School got like an 85% on this test. And there might have been a handful of people in the 60s and 70s. The vast majority of them flunked it. Some of them got like 10%, 18%. Wow. And these were, and I saw the Bible timeline. It all had to do with recognizing where major characters of the Bible fit. In so that you, I know the name Abraham. Okay, was Abraham before or after Moses? Okay, I know the name Joshua. Was Joshua before or after David? Because, and it's not just a matter of trivia. These things matter.
Right.
When you pull a scripture out and say, well, this is why I don't like Christianity because God said this to Moses or God said this to Joshua. You need to understand where we were in the history.
Yeah, exactly right.
Where we were in God's plan for the ages.
Right.
And why what he said to Job might not apply to us today.
Right.
For Job's a great example because not only is he pre-New Covenant, he's pre-Old Covenant.
Yes. Yeah.
And what God says and what he requires changes enormously depending on where we are in the vast scheme of things. And that doesn't mean that God changes. It doesn't mean that God's schizophrenic or anything. There is a specific direction. Every moment in that plan shows us something about God, shows us something about ourselves, our enemy, and where we're at, and leads us ultimately to prepare us for the arrival of Jesus, the Messiah.
Right.
But if you don't know where these people are in that timeline, you miss so much.
Absolutely.
And that's one of the greatest values of reading Scripture, reading the Bible cover to cover.
Absolutely.
Absolutely. Cover to cover, but also chronological is good too.
Yeah,
but it is more or less chronological until you get to Psalms.
Right.
Yeah. Oh, true. As I was saying, my youth leaders and I are going through a chronological through the Bible in a year study.
It's really fun when you get to like Kings and Chronicles and you're just jumping all over.
Oh my gosh, it's everywhere. Right.
Well, and there you go with Kings and Chronicles. You've got some overlap.
Yeah.
Cover
and
the
then
same
the Gospels too. You get some of that too. But I had a student last night. He'd just looked like a pretty brand new Bible, and he was excited. He's like, I'm starting to read the Bible. Here's how far I've gotten in Genesis. And I said, what do you think? Let me know. And he's like, oh my gosh, I can't believe God did this and God did that and all this stuff. And I'm just like, okay. And I told him, I said, well, just be ready, because as soon as you get to, Joshua and Judges, God uses his people to judge people from another land. And that's a lot of that. That's a big stumbling block for some people, because it's like, how could God?
The conquest.
Right. Yeah. It's like, well, now you got to listen. You got to take this stuff in context here and understand what's happening. God gave these people hundreds of years to turn to Him.
That's right.
Yeah.
And they were committing some atrocities in their own civilizations, their own nations, and God's people were basically just His arm of judgment on these nations. Anyway, I'm not going to open that can of worms, but I'm just saying, like, as somebody who's just digging into the Bible, it's like, there's a lot of questions you have about.
If you don't have questions, you're not reading it.
Exactly.
Right. People want to bring up things about slavery and women as property and things like that. And all those things can be understood and explained fairly straightforwardly.
Yeah.
But don't just let somebody point to one verse in the Bible and say, I can't believe in a God whose Bible would say this.
Yeah.
Let's read the whole thing in context, not just of that passage, but in context of the rest of the Bible.
Right.
And that takes a little bit of time. It doesn't take all the time in the world, but it does take a little bit of time and effort. And I think it's fair to say, look, let's start by presuming that this is worth some time to study, because the Bible has withstood the test of time.
Right.
It's still the most influential book in human history.
Yeah.
Right.
So, I understand if somebody comes up to you randomly and say, hey, I just found this great book that you've never heard of, but you're going to have to study it for 10 years to understand it. Okay, maybe I'm not going to, I'm not on board with that. But let's look at why the Bible continues to have the impact it has, because there's a reason for it.
And I think a lot of those people that would come up and say, I can't believe the Bible because of this, are not being intellectually honest to begin with. They're just looking for an excuse to throw everything out. And because if you probably dig into their worldview and what they do believe, you can probably find some pretty craziness done in the name of their worldview too. You know what I'm saying? It's like, okay, let's compare on the basis of merit here. Come on.
Right. Yeah. That's right.
Context is key.
That's right.
Context is key.
So I wanted to mention a couple things, if that's all right, as far as youth ministry goes, and a couple of cool testimonials from my standpoint. So I lead an FCA huddle on Thursdays for the varsity football team, and it has been amazing this year. We started it back up last year. We had a couple years off because of some health things and COVID and all that craziness. So we picked it back up last year, had a pretty decent turnout. And this year, I think we're well over 20 guys in every huddle.
Wow.
And it has been really good. They are like listening. They're not just there just chilling, like they're listening. We do a little lesson. We do a little just little discussion. I asked some questions. I changed it up this year a little bit. I brought a little FCA New Testament with me, so I'll highlight the scripture, the passage for that lesson, and I'll hand it to a guy and say, hey, can you read this? Read it loud for everybody to hear. And so they've been doing that. So I've got a little New Testament that's all highlighted up from our passages that I'll probably end up giving out to one of the guys afterwards. But the cool thing, this is part of my testimony. So last week, after I got done with the lesson, like I said, these are only like 15 minutes long. I try not to drag them out because they just got done with practice. They're ready to go home, and they've all been really awesome to come and sit and just listen to me, and have a conversation. So that's been great. But I don't want to disrespect their time, so I make them short. But after we got done, I set my stuff down. I said, does anybody have any questions before we circle up and pray? And with several guys, not necessarily about the lesson, but just like, hey, how long do you study the Bible? How often do you read? What is this? Right. What is that? Just a few little questions like that, just basic, like day-to-day kind of questions. It was very, very cool. But then after we got done praying, like 4 guys came up to me, and I always keep a box of FCA stuff in my trunk. I've got bracelets to give out that I give out for every huddle. And then FCA Bibles. They have really nice Bibles that they give away, And so I always keep some with me because our local FCA is always nice enough to make sure I'm stocked up on stuff. And I had 4 guys come up to me after a huddle and get Bibles from me, which was awesome. Is awesome. Yeah. So excited. So you can just see, and this was my testimony in our small group. Ashley and I attend the Wednesday morning small group with Pastor Mike and Sandy. And then one of my testimonies yesterday was just how I'm just seeing, I feel like, and maybe it's just me, but I feel like I'm seeing more of a hunger in young people for the things of God because they can see all the stuff going on in the world around them. I'm assuming, and I'm just seeing more of a hunger.
Praise the Lord.
And more of I believe, a revival coming. Our FCA group in the high school right now is like 70 kids. It's huge.
That's awesome.
And you're hearing more kids talk about stuff like this and everything. And that doesn't mean they're all, like sold out followers of Jesus. In fact, I had a conversation with one guy in my huddle that isn't even saved. He just comes because he feels like this is where I need to be. It's good for me. Yeah, that's all he knows is it's good for him. But guess what? That's a start, and there's fertile ground there. God can work with somebody who's at least open and willing to admit that he needs something.
That's right.
So I'm super, super excited about it, and that's been a huge. And we had an influx of kids coming into youth group and getting excited about youth ministry, which makes me super excited about youth ministry. But when we get more kids coming in, and it's just more active, and it's been a really cool last few months.
That's awesome.
Yeah, very good.
Praise the Lord.
Yeah,
that's awesome. Good. That is exciting.
Very exciting.
Yeah. So. I think that wraps up, but real quick, do you guys we're in the fall season.
Hey, let me say this. Speaking of seasons, we're actually, it's not speaking of seasons, it's speaking of testimonials. We are still in a...
it wasn't even up. There we go.
We are... I might be wrapping it up this weekend, but I've done several messages in recent weeks on healing.
Oh, yes, very good.
And just wanted to say, I'm not going to share any right now. They're really not my stories to tell, but there have been some amazing testimonies from people who have experienced manifestations of healing in their body since this, either through laying out of hands, praying for them in church, or just grasping these truths that they're hearing in church. And it's just... These are the things that, yes, we should be excited about them, but yes, we should also expect them. I want that to become like the new normal.
Exactly.
I prayed and received my healing. I believed and received my healing. Obviously, there are more things to talk about than just healing, but when we're talking about it, I want to see people... we want to see the results, not just people getting excited about a good message, but it making a difference in their lives.
Yeah. Well, I mean, you mentioned it. I'll share one I had. So before we went to our trip to Utah, I think it was that Sunday before we left, I woke up with like a sore throat, like a dry throat. Yeah. And at where I work at the dealership, there had been like a bug, a flu bug going around. And when I woke up that Sunday morning, that was the first, that's the thought in your head. It's like, I got this flu bug, and I'm going on this trip, and I don't want it to ruin it. And I almost immediately, I was like, I'm not not dealing with that. Not going to let it ruin this trip. Not going to let it go any further. So, and I think that Sunday, I went up and got you laid hands, and because I think you had a healing line that day, if I'm remembering. Is only 2 weeks ago. So, but the next 2 days, it was still kind of there, but, you just continue to say, I am healed. No matter what I'm feeling right now, I am healed and God is working in my body. And then that morning when we left to go on the plane, no sore throat.
Praise the Lord.
Stuffy nose, no headache, nothing. Was fine the whole trip. The only thing that hurt afterwards were my legs.
Yeah.
From hiking.
Because how far did you say you guys hiked?
We hiked about 45 miles over 4 days.
That is crazy.
So, and
that's
more
over
than
10 miles a day. You got to be on the ball with this.
I know. I'll get there. We'll get there. Yeah.
Leaving 20 for me.
Yeah, that would have been a good point to have some brain computing sound or something. But yeah, I mean, I think I like that testimony for just because it's sometimes it's not instantaneous.
Right.
Maybe even a lot of times it's not instantaneous, but like we kind of talked about with James, it's the working out of your faith in those instances.
Sure.
It's I've prayed over this. My pastors, prayed over this with me. Now I just got to be faithful to continue to speak that healing out and believe that healing out.
Sure. What's coming out of that's the proper understanding of confession, to speak in agreement with God.
Yeah.
But yeah, this is maybe it's something we can talk about next week. I'm suggesting that when we don't have a guest specifically to interview, maybe we can talk about some of the things that are the pulpit,
absolutely,
in a youth group or the Sunday morning pulpit or whatever, and just flesh some of these things out. Give a little more backstory. Since we're talking about healing, let's talk about healings. Let's hear some testimonies and things.
So
like that.
Listen and watch.
That's right.
You might miss something.
Like and subscribe.
This episode brought to you by.
So you started to say it's fall coming.
Yeah,
up, right?
I was just gonna say it's fall. I don't know when this episode's necessarily gonna go out.
Tomorrow.
But tomorrow. Well,
Tomorrow.
Okay.
You got a day off today. You have zero going on. It's not like you have your own place to take care of or anything.
Yeah,
so
plenty of time. But real quick, curious to what your guys' thoughts are. Your top 3 fall things.
I was going to say top 3 seasons. Well, there's not 3 out of 4.
Right. Yeah. No, just top 3 fall things.
Like,
it can be anything.
Like, if you wanted me to say high boots and pumpkin spice, like
go for it. If that's your favorite things, go for it.
I'll tell you what, they took away my favorite fall thing, which was burning leaves. That's something, they passed a burn ordinance here in town just maybe a year. I think the year after we bought our first house, which was, this tree-lined street. And I've always enjoyed raking leaves and burning leaves. There's something about the smell and the activity.
You enjoy raking leaves?
I guess maybe because I know what it's leading up to.
Gotcha.
Burn.
The payoff of playing with fire.
Can't do that anymore. And I get it. I'm not going to be salty about it because I understand the smoke really bothers people with breathing issues.
Yeah.
But why can't those people just live somewhere where there are no trees? No, that's one of my things. I do. One of the things I like about fall is the anticipation. As most people know, I'm a bigger fan of cold weather than I am hot weather. And so I like fall because I know the weather's getting colder.
Yeah.
I like spring too, but
Yeah.
I kind of don't because I know hot weather's coming. So fall, it's like it's leading up into winter.
Yeah.
Oh.
So there's 2 things.
There's
anyway.
2 things. Do you have a third in a bank off the top of your head?
Well, I guess this would. No, I'll save that one for winter. But
Fair enough.
Wait, what? Now I'm curious.
Fireplace.
I knew it. I knew you were going to say building a fire.
Well, you could say bonfire.
Yeah, it can.
Bonfire. You could
Wiener roast, cookouts.
Wiener roast, yeah. I know for me, that bonfire is one of them. I enjoy bonfires, especially when it's that, that's cool. It's the hoodie weather.
Yes.
Hoodie and maybe a jacket, and you're just sitting around the bonfire, and that's a good time. Football. I like football in the fall. That's a good fall. And then also just fall, I'll say fall desserts, like Thanksgiving desserts. So not necessarily the full-blown pumpkin, but just it's the way I would describe it is they're warm. They're warm desserts, like they're warm colors, pumpkin pie, apple pie,
autumn mix candy.
Yeah. Not candy corn.
Candy corn.
The full-on autumn
candy
mix,
corn?
man.
The pumpkin Reese's peanut butter cups, I'll count that as a fall. Yeah.
I don't know if I've ever had the pleasure.
Oh, it's
anything, any of the
mixture.
special like Reese's that like the pumpkins or the eggs for Easter. Those are just a little bit of chocolate on the outside and a whole bunch of that peanut butter.
The perfect ratio.
See, and that's what I don't like about them. I like that thick ridge of chocolate on the.
Do you really?
Original. Oh, yeah,
so you like the big cups because they're like tons of chocolate on those things.
Yeah.
Gotcha. Okay. Brought to you by Reese. No,
Brought to you by What about you, Matt? What you got?
I would say probably my biggest thing. I'm more of a Christmas kind of person. There's a lot more. I could probably mention a dozen things about the Christmas season that I love. But for fall, I would say sitting out by the fire. We love doing for youth group fireside chats and stuff, which we try to do whenever the weather's chilly, but fall is perfect for it. And then probably my top thing is going to Naked Guard's pumpkin patch outside of Sydney and picking out pumpkins with the family. Like I give the kids a budget, hey, pick out your pumpkins, and I always I call it the Big Daddy pumpkin. Like my entire I don't get it. I don't care about any other pumpkins. I just want the biggest one, best looking one out there. I don't care if it's $40. I don't even care.
That's going to be a pain to move once spring comes or winter comes around.
Well, how long do you think we keep these pumpkins outside? It's like as soon as Thanksgiving's over, they are gone.
There you go.
But yeah, sometimes if I got one year that was like $40. This thing was huge. I couldn't hardly move it, but I wanted this pumpkin, so I got it. But this year when we went out there just this past weekend, or just this past Monday. And they didn't have there was nothing like just ginormous out there, but it was still sizable. So I got the Big Daddy pumpkin, and then I got Ashley one that was a little bit smaller. So that's the Mama pumpkin. It's just fun. Abigail has gotten into where she just loves decorating for stuff. So she's got a whole plan for the front porch, and her and Ashley were already decorating for fall in the house, which is so just that kind of just the vibe, I guess.
Sure.
I love it.
And then what's your third?
This is going to sound really crazy, but like apple cider, apple scented candles. I love apples.
Apple cider.
Apple cider.
Some warm apple cider.
That's where I'm. I like cold apple cider.
You like cold apple cider?
I don't like hot apple cider.
Ooh, I like both.
Yeah. At least maybe I should clarify. I don't like cinnamon apple stuff. I've never been a big cinnamon apple fan. No, I just like straight apple. So if it's hot apple cider, it just has to be plain apple cider. So, and here's the cool thing though. We haven't done it in quite a while, but my granddad has an apple press. It's like this old, this thing looks like it's from the 1800s, which it very well could be, I don't know, but it's old. And so you put all the apples in, and this thing just grinds them up, and then they all kind of flop down into this nasty wooden bucket. There's got to be 6 forms of botulism in this thing, but I have no idea. But then you have this crank press that just juices everything out. Wow. It is so cool to do. But my parents lost their apple tree a few years ago, so we haven't really done it lately. No. So,
but you don't like cinnamon. That's because you a cinnamon.
Now there's good timing right there. No, well, I like cinnamon. For some reason, I've just never been a big fan of that's why I don't like apple pie.
Apple Jacks?
No. Wow. And I worked at a restaurant.
You worked at the apple
dumpling. Never had an apple dumpling working there because it was apple cinnamon. It's just not a big apple butter. I'm just not a big fan because it's got cinnamon in it.
That's rough. Well, we'll wrap it up there with Matt not liking apples. So
no, I love apples.
How you like
not apple cinnamon.
Apple cinnamon. All right.
Hey, how do you like
that? All right. Well, thank you all for joining us. Like I said, make sure to listen, subscribe, do all those things. We appreciate it, and let us know how we're doing. Let us know what we can do extra. Because like we said, we want to make this podcast enjoyable for you, our church family.
Or send your deep theological questions to podcast at.
There you go. LWFC. I'd love to do a Q&A.
That would be right up your alley.
Yes, question of the week. So awesome. Well, you guys have a good one, and we'll see you next time.
Peace.
Peace.